Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Kalfa. Let's talk about some wolves. Here on the Wolf Connection podcast with Stephen and myself, joining us from Hailey, Idaho. He is the field advisor for Lava Lake Lamb and the Wood River Wolf Project, Kurt Holtzen. Kurt, pleasure to have you with us. How are you doing in Idaho today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for reaching out. I know you emailed us and you got in contact with Ree, who's our development coordinator, which is great that you reached out. I feel like we've been having this wave of people who have been reaching out as opposed to us having to do the contacting. So this is great. Can you give everybody just a little bit of a background on what the field advisor for Lava Lake Lamb and Wood River Wolf Project is and what how that role is?
Yeah, so as a field advisor, I'm not on staff. I'm a volunteer. I don't make any money. Either program it allows me some latitude, and I kind of like it that way. So what I do is assist with the coexistence program with Lava Lake, coming up with all the SOP and some of the tool modifications that we've used over the years. And then with the Wood River Wolf Project, kind of the same capacity. I provide some continuity. I've been with the project since 2014. So as new personnel come and go, I kind of do some of the training and advising for field operations.
So what's that training involved with, and what are you teaching these new individuals when they come on for both organizations?
Yeah, oftentimes it's just non-lethal tools use, conflict mitigation tools use, how we're using the tools. A lot of it is sometimes camera work, where to place cameras where we've historically seen wolves, just the general lay of the land, that kind of thing. Nothing too special.
Since 2014, how have your methods changed for this non-lethal deterrence, or what's really changed in the organization or in the conversation as it relates to the organization since 2014? It seems like a lifetime ago now.
Yeah, that's a ways back. Feels like a lifetime sometimes. So prior to 2014, 15, the Wolf Project was really run by the Defenders of Wildlife. It was reasonably well funded and had a lot of personnel. So they were able to do a lot of things in the field that were beneficial. Just by having people that could go out, wolf guardians, and go out and stay with the sheep bands and provide human presence that way. In 2015, the project really changed hands. Lava Lake Institute for Science and Conservation became the fiscal sponsor and manager of the Wolf Project, and funding became a bigger issue. So what we had to do is figure out how to accomplish the same kind of things with a skeleton crew, basically, minimal personnel. So we had to rethink the whole idea behind how do we get non-lethal and conflict mitigation tools in the field with these sheep bands.
What does equipment like this cost?
They're not super expensive. They do have some cost. Right now, with Lava Lake Lamb, our biggest tool has been the dogs, of course. That's the first layer. We use a multiple layer approach. Guardian dogs are the first layer. Then we will up that with some kind of a protective collar. And the collar we're filling this year has a blinking LED, which simulates human presence. And then the next layer is Fox lights that we use. And they are an electronic device developed in Australia by Ian Whalen, who came up with them to help with depredation with fox and sheep. But we've used them pretty successfully here with wolves. They're a dusk dawn operated piece of equipment. They come on at dark and then have a randomized pattern of lights that will go all night until sunrise, and then they go back off.
Curious, what kind of dogs are these? I mean, are you using like small cattle dogs or bigger breeds like Pyrenees or something?
Yeah, these are big guardian dogs. These are Pyrenees, Akbosh, and that type of dog. 100 plus pounds usually. We typically like to see at least 4 dogs with a band, and that's what Lava Lake runs. Right now we have Akbosh, Kangal Cross, and Pyrenees working in the field, and they really are the backbone of coexistence and non-lethal work. They are the backbone and do all the hard work and
Very cool.
are with the band 24/7 the whole season.
Yeah, those dogs need to get a lot of credit. How big is the range that you have for Lava Lake Lamb in Idaho? It has to be substantial, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't really know the exact numbers. It's substantial. Something larger than 24,000 acres, I think. It's big, and they've retired quite a number of allotments that they had prior to last year. So,
who invents these technologies? Do you know names, or are they old enough to the point where it's kind of got lost?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff's been in use for a long time. Wildlife Services back in the 70s started with some of this stuff, actually. And then people like Ian in Australia with the fox lights really kind of pushed the envelope. And then turbo flattery and those things, have been around for a long time. And most of what we're doing isn't really any new things, but what we do are taking existing technologies and configuring them to be user-friendly and minimal amount of labor involved for the herder. So we're trying to make it easier and easier for this stuff to get in the field and be used.
And you guys train the Pyrenees, or is this kind of just a natural instinctual job for them?
Yeah, it's kind of a instinctual thing. They're raised with sheep and they bond with the sheep band, and so they prefer sheep company over humans most of the time. Although Lava Lake dogs are socialized to the point where we can handle them and they're friendly to humans. It's a little bit of a odd situation here in the Wood River Valley because of all the recreational use. And most of those people have dogs. So if you have a dog that is too hot, it's just not going to work. A too aggressive dog. So it's kind of a strange balance trying to have a dog that responds to predator threats, but is then soft enough to interact with people out recreating with their dogs. So.
And yeah, there's some different level of intelligence there, I'd imagine, that runs through those Pyrenees that you guys have in order to strike that balance. Because I'm sure you get some dogs wandering on the wandering in these fields at some point. So I'm sure you've had your share of run-ins, not only with predators, but also with domestic canines as well.
Yeah, it can happen. Lava Lake's dogs, which I've had the most experience with, are really, really good at transitioning from being a guard dog for the band and then also interacting with people. They are super great dogs. They usually stay with the band and don't wander a whole lot. So that's really helpful. And I can't say enough good things about the dogs that they're using.
So tell me about the reason you reached out for us, because I know you in your email that I saw, it really started, I believe, after a lot of the Idaho legislature passed with SB, it seemed like around SB 1211. And that seemed to be the reason for your reach out to come on and talk with Stephen and myself. So what was we talk about the radical middle a lot, Stephen and myself, and you echoed that, which I thought was fascinating. So what was the call for you to reach out to have this conversation with us?
Yeah, I was, this is really outside my lane. I'm a field guy. I'm boots on the ground. I don't do this kind of thing often. And so I felt compelled to maybe push the story forward that coexistence works. Here recently, we've heard a lot of things about how large carnivores and wolves specifically are not able to coexist with ranching. And it just isn't true. So with SB 1211, is so unbalanced. I just felt like that I needed to push a voice out there that was saying, hey, coexistence works, conflict mitigation tools work. We've been doing it for a while and we're pretty good at it. And, it's just this unbalanced approach is not needed.
Yeah, I looked at some of the data because I had Suzanne Asha Stone on, and the numbers are staggering in the positive. In that, I think over the course, I believe, of 15 years or however long Wood River Wolf Project has been going on, they've lost maybe a dozen sheep over the course of that time. And it's all due to the coexistence measures that they have used, like you were talking about with the fox lights and the flagerie and things of that sort. What can you speak to the implementation of the tools and why they work so well? Is it because of the training that goes on from people such as yourself to others in the organization, so that it's almost as though it's information that's passed down through generations, so to speak?
Yeah, so it has very little to do with the training, I think. The fact that it works so well is that wolves are so afraid of humans that they really don't want anything to do with us. Their preferred stance is to be somewhere away from human presence. And so if you put human presence in the field, simulated, fox lights simulate human presence. It's something they don't see in the natural world. It's a human thing. They really don't want to have anything to do with it. It's very easy. I have found it to be, if you use the tools, put them in the field, it just amazes me that it works as well as it does. I really thought in the beginning that it would not work this well.
In your experience, is there a response to those who say, for example, these methods are temporary, that wolves learn really quick? And what is your take on the idea that wolves essentially self-regulate and the concept of lethal management after a successful reintroduction?
Yeah, that's a complicated one. That's kind of a bunch rolled into one. So as far as habituating to the non-lethal, we really haven't had an issue with that. Mm-hmm. We seem to have wolves that will come in every 7 to 10 days, have a look at what's going on, and then leave and be gone. Mm. And typically our season, 60, 90 days will get us through the biggest part of the season. So we really haven't seen, once the tools go in the field, we haven't seen them pushed or wolves going past or depredating after that fact. Wow. So. And then non-lethal is always going to have a place when you're talking about the management side of things, especially when you're dealing with agriculture. It's an important key. It's like two sides of the same coin, and non-lethal and lethal control should hold the same weight when you're making management decisions, and you should make it the decision just based on the facts in the field. And try not to involve all the human baggage that we like to attach to this issue.
Right, I love it. In the spirit of radical middle, I feel like I should play devil's advocate sometimes. But have you come across any scenarios in which coexistence and non-lethal management and non-lethal methods do not work, or where coexistence won't work?
Yeah, I have not. That's a pretty easy one. We have interacted with a wolf. It's a collared wolf. This wolf, as a yearling, was involved in a depredation. He got a collar put on. We coexisted with that wolf an entire season, which was last season. Kind of lost track of him over the wintertime. He came in and depredated had a depredation on Lava Lake sheep. Around Easter time, we put out non-lethal, and we have been coexisting with that wolf off and on for the entire season.
Wow!
So that wolf's and two known depredations that I know of, and we deployed the coexistence or the conflict mitigation tools, and he respected them. So. The problem and the reason why we had the depredation is we weren't doing our part. We were not ready. We did not expect to have wolf presence where he showed up, and that was 100% our fault.
That's such a great way to put it, Kurt. Do you see that the way that your organization, Lava Lake Lamb, handles just that particular depredation different than how a lot of the other legislation goes about the larger picture? Because I feel as though you could have the same instance where there's a depredation or two and it's immediate to go to that lethal measure. Whereas Lava Lake Lamb took the step back, almost from what you're saying, took ownership of the fact that you guys weren't on top of your sheep, implemented those non-lethals, and then you've had a perfect a better coexistence since then. Do you see that there's a lot of rush to judgment and a lot of rush to just eliminate the problem as opposed to trying to fix it on humans' end in some of these larger cases?
Yeah, definitely. And that goes back to the human baggage thing that we attach to this issue. If you look at it from a wildlife management issue, sometimes the lethal control will make things worse because you go in and you take out a member of a pack that's maybe a major player in the pack, and you weaken that pack so they're more likely to depredate. Our approach is we take ownership of the fact that we weren't doing what we were supposed to do. We got caught with our pants down. Now let's go out there and use the non-lethal and see what happens. And to date, once the non-lethal goes in the field, the depredation stopped and we didn't have any more trouble. So.
Wow. So what's the information that I know mostly how Wood River Wolf Project approaches the information that they're giving out to the general public in the coexistence methods that they use and how it affects the entire ecosystem with the predators and the fact that the sheep are able to coexist. What are the ways in which Lava Lake Lamb pushes out the information from their point of view about their coexistence measures, how it works? And are you trying to implement that information, those tactics with other sheep herders, cattle, livestock, individuals, or is it specific just to Lava Lake Lamb?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm trying to do today, I guess, is push that forward. And I guess we've done that through the project. When Lava Lake was the fiscal sponsor, did a lot of training and a lot of travel into some other states to help train herders. So trying to step forward and do a little better job of that, I guess, is why I'm here today.
No, and everything that you're doing, and again, I thank you for reaching out to us so we can have this conversation. I love that the approach is to look inward or look into the human error that could be done or how humans can do better. Because a lot of the conversations that we seem to have or stumble upon into on our podcast is really the wild side of it, people not really understanding that it's nature's way of finding the easiest prey for them. And if there's a way that we can coexist in that way to deter that to happen, there are ways to do it. And so it seems that a lot of what Lava Lake Lamb is doing, because I went through your website and there's plenty of information on there about how you're implementing these strategies, and it's fascinating to see that. So how did you get started first with Wood River Wolf Project? Because that I believe was first, and then you moved on to Lava Lake Lamb, and I didn't realize you were juggling both at the same time. So how did you get started initially, just wanting to get into this and working coexistence-wise with predators?
Yeah, so early on, I've always had an interest in wildlife. I was a hunter, did a lot of stuff in the backcountry. When the wolf reintroduction came along, I was a little skeptical. I was secretly excited that I might get to see a wolf in the Frank Church, but I didn't really vocalize that because it wasn't a very popular stance to have in Idaho at that time. So I'm kind of a researcher and a show me kind of guy. So I try to find the truth for myself. And so I started doing some research and watched Living with Wolves with the Dutchers, their documentary, which was a big tipping point for me. And then ended up moving to Yellowstone. And about that time, I read Wolfer by Carter Niemeyer. And that really, I really identified with Carter and that book, and it really helped me to gain an interest in coexistence and that type of work and wolves in general. And then my time in Yellowstone really changed my perception of what wolves were, how they act, and all of the wives' tales and bad press that wolves got wasn't necessarily true. And so interacting with wild wolves in and around the Yellowstone ecosystem really changed my dogma about large carnivores. So and about that time, I reached out to the Wood River Wolf Project, and they wanted me to help as a field technician that first season in 2014. It was the last season for Defenders. So I drove from West Yellowstone, Montana over here to Hailey, Idaho, and helped the project on the weekends and when I could. I think I drove like 3,000 miles that first season, but it was well worth it, and I learned a lot.
And so it's amazing how because we just interviewed Jim and Jamie Dutcher not too long ago, and then Carter was a while back. It's amazing how you found these things through the course of your life and moving through Yellowstone. It's like you hit the 3 points to really change the perspective on your own, which is great to see. What was it about Carter's book and Carter in general that you identified with, and why that struck you so much?
Yeah, we're just somewhat alike in the fact that I've spent time in the Midwest, and my heritage comes from the Midwest, like his, and his interest in the wild things, and kind of his change of dogma also over the years after being out there and seeing what it's really like. I just really identified with the book Wolfer and Carter in general. And Carter has been a huge help to me. He's really been a big mentor, and every time I've reached out to him for guidance or advice, he's been very willing and very helpful. So I probably would not be doing what I'm doing had I not read Wolfer and then got a hold of Carter and started talking to him.
Because ranchers and hunters are sort of the two groups that they have more, they feel like they have more to lose in the process of reintroduction. I guess for hunters, it's access to game. As a hunter who is also pro-wolf, sort of what makes a hunter in a general sense tick, or through what picture they see the world of the outdoors, again, in a general sense. But is there something specific that you needed to hear to shift your thoughts that was able to change your mind?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. It's something that I heard. I'm very much, I don't really take anybody at their word. If somebody tells me something, I'm probably going to go out and see it for myself. And so all the time I spent in the backcountry in Yellowstone, there are a lot of elk. There's a lot of big bulls. And also in Idaho, in this area, we have a very good wolf presence, and there are elk everywhere. So just basically through my own discovery of, being out in the field and seeing that, 20 plus years of wolf presence, and elk are really healthy. I mean, and there are a lot of them out there. They're not gone. So, that was really how that came about.
Do you think that if there was an obvious reduction of elk numbers that you would have thought differently, or is that not part of the overall outlook? Yeah,
it's possible. Certainly having that proven, that part of the wolf myth, had that proven out, I might have taken a little different stance. I have never been against any large carnivore or predator. Always kind of respected them, even before doing this kind of work. So I enjoy them as part of nature and their role that they play in the ecosystem.
I think that's even more of a testament to the fact that you've seen proof that coexistence is possible.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think because we spoke with another hunter, Brett Ox, not too long ago, and he really said the same thing as you're saying, is that it seems as though if people don't see it for themselves or aren't willing to take the hike into the backcountry to know that there are healthy elk numbers or healthy deer numbers, and there is a massive amount of ungulates in these states, particularly with the Idahos, the Montanas, the Wyomings, where there seem to be a lot of the legislative problems where people are butting their heads with the wolf situation. It seems as though it almost needs to be, as for you, it needs to be seen with their own two eyes. If they go and see that there are the bull elk, to see that there are these herds are healthy, they're strong, and they're just moving around because they have these predators in their backyard again. And for the last couple of decades, it's made them stronger and better.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, they evolved together. I mean, it makes sense that they need each other to be the strongest that they can be. And just this season, the herder was relaying a story to me that I found very interesting. That in the past, the dogs will sometimes find elk with calves and maybe chase them or, interact with them. And beginning this season, some of the elk cows have become pretty aggressive and are chasing the dogs, which is something he had never seen before. So elk are figuring it out. I mean, they will instinctually figure out how to deal with this large carnivore and have for eons. So I thought that was a pretty interesting story that he relayed to me, and he found it to be pretty amazing. So, and
do you think domesticated cattle will figure it out as well?
Yeah, that's a much harder thing because we've bred all the smart out of cattle and bred all the horns off of them. So I think over time, with the right selection process, we could get back to that where, back when we had large carnivores on the landscape, those cattle were made to go out and survive on the range with minimal health. Humans. I mean, they had horns and they had mothering ability and they were a pretty tough customer. And then once we eradicated the large carnivore presence, we started breeding cattle back to a gentler, easier to handle cow, so that it was, maybe a little less dangerous for us to handle them in the corrals and that kind of thing. But there are some people that are going the other direction, and it's encouraging. And I really think that, you could get a long ways with the right breeding program and the right breeds of cattle.
Yeah, this is something that kind of has blown my mind, because it's something you don't think about unless you grew up on a farm. I mean, I live on a farm now, so I get to watch this herd of cows outside, and it's pretty incredible how obvious it is that so many of these advantageous features of animals that size that live out on the landscape, how much they've lost evolution wise. They just don't really have a lot to work with other than size. And for wolves, that's not really enough, because they take down animals that size or bigger sometimes. But do you think this idea of being able to stop the problem before it starts by sort of guiding the evolution of domestic cattle to be more like their ancestors, is this a widespread idea that everyone kind of knows about and is either going in that direction or deliberately choosing not to go in that direction? Or is this still waiting to get out?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there that are probably doing it. I don't have as much experience on the cattle side of things, but my history is pretty strong in agriculture. I come from a homesteading family, 5 generations in this country, farming, and I grew up and went to high school and was in the FFA and did ag shop, and then I worked with cattle in my early years, and really I do this work because I really have a big love for agriculture, and I like to see them succeed. I mean,
yeah,
and that's all part of it, is taking a look at what a producer can do to minimize depredations, through a breeding program or selecting the right cattle and that sort of thing. So I think it's an open field, and I think it's super interesting and something that would be great to look at.
Is it a hard sell essentially because those ancestral features that would be an advantage to their survival would not necessarily be desirable in terms of their market value and would really require a change of practices just to even, butcher this more aggressive horned cow that you can't really get close to easily?
Yeah, right. It's it is a tough sell, and I'm sure that there's a lot of resistance to that, and nobody wants to get into a corral with an ornery heifer
Right.
with big horns, me included. So I totally understand that, but I think there's an opportunity to work backwards, at least to some point where the cows have enough attitude to say, hey, yeah, no, you're not eating my calf, or you're not eating me. Present some attitude, and it's probably more about the attitude than it is the horns.
Yeah,
Wolves are a great cost benefit calculator. I mean, they risk benefit calculator. They will look at a situation and instantly figure out, is this worth me getting stomped into a mud hole to have some beef tonight? And that's what you need to do, is present a cow that says, yeah, no, this is not going to happen.
Yeah, it's true. A lot. There's several females out in the pasture here, and only one of them really is pissed off enough, I think, to protect herself in that way, which is sort of strange.
Yeah, I've tagged a lot of calves that have cows that were pretty protective, and it's not a whole lot of fun. And I certainly was weighing the cost benefit of putting the tag in the calf's ear versus being stomped into the ground. So
that's what you want. Yeah.
I can relate to what the wolves are thinking about.
Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What's the difference, other than size, in the way that sheep are handled? Because it seems as though obviously there are more protective measures used, rightfully so, with sheep because smaller animal. But do they still smaller? But is there a way that they're protecting the lambs as well? Like in terms of there's a lot of them that they're able to drive off predators, or is it mostly human, dog, other sorts of non-lethal measures to help protect them? Or is there any focus? Is there any truth that they can have sort of that pissed offness as well? Or is it not possible with sheep and that's just sort of the way they are because of their size?
Yeah, I think it's a size thing, and really, their outlook on life is much different, and they are much more vulnerable. So it's almost 100% dogs, herder, electronic device. We're presenting a package to what the wolves see as being, this is not worth a lamb meal.
Right. I guess the natural cousins of sheep, they're just on terrain that probably a wolf would not want to get to, and in this case, that's their natural protection. But that same animal in an open pasture is kind of like an easy meal without dogs and horses and people.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've seen ewes challenge herding dogs a little bit. So I mean, it's not 100% bred out of them, but to a much greater degree than I think cattle, for sure.
Do you think you mentioned it before, and I just want to get your take. Do you think this working backwards method, as you just mentioned, it seems to have caught a little bit, because the more people that we speak to in this arena in coexistence, it really seems that it's catching on more so, I think, than probably 5 to 10 years ago, that cattle ranchers, herders, farmers are willing to go back to, I guess, and I am not a farm person by any means. I wasn't grown up in that type of family, but they're going back to the harder style of farming, or the more natural way of farming. Do you see that's starting to gain a little bit momentum out there in Idaho and these western states?
Yeah, I think so. Overall, I think there's a lot of movement towards a more natural management style, and an easier way of maybe going the same way as nature instead of trying to go against nature. It just is almost always easier. And we've kind of seen some things. We're just now getting to the point where we have enough wolf presence on the landscape that we've seen some things like a lesser degree of coyote presence when we have wolves on an allotment. Right. And we saw it somewhat for the first time this season. And the herder kind of mentioned that, hey, there's no coyotes down here where we're seeing wolves. And certainly at the main ranch, that was also somewhat the case. I mean, it's just one season, but, I think a more natural management style where if you can coexist with a wolf pack that is displacing coyotes, which are a much bigger problem, I would rather go into an allotment with 3 wolf packs than 3 coyotes, just because they're just such a whole different management problem. But if you could use the wolf pack that's coexisting, respecting the conflict mitigation tools to displace the coyotes, and the coyotes are a much bigger depredation problem, that just makes sense to me. And why not use nature to benefit your management? So,
yeah, I was going to ask if that if seeing less coyotes was a major thing for ranchers, if that's something they were working on before, or if they were successfully coexisting with coyotes. How does that relationship pan out with ranchers? Because it's something we don't really hear about that often.
Yeah, coyotes are a much bigger problem, and they depredate far, far more than probably any other carnivore. Generally, they're lethally controlled. Coyotes habituate to human presence much easier than some of the other large carnivores. So they're a much more difficult predator to manage. But
which I guess is why they survived the early market hunting period, and wolves did not. They just adapt and they get over all this stuff.
Yeah, they just habituate to human presence, and they just go about their day. That guy's going to shoot at me. Okay, well, I'll just stay 200 yards away from that guy. So, they're super smart, and they're super good at surviving. So, and a much bigger issue when you're talking about depredations than wolves have ever been. So it's kind of interesting that we sometimes get hung up on the wolf issue because of our human baggage. And,
I've heard of domestic dogs also being an issue on ranches in terms of depredation. Is that a thing in Idaho, or is that more, I mean, I've heard of it in desert communities more so, but curious if that's a thing, wild or feral domestic dogs.
Yeah, I haven't tracked that, and I'm going to guess it is, and it shows up every year in depredation reports that domestic dog is. And in the early years of the Wood River Wolf Project, that first year, I think one of the depredations was a domestic dog. So it does happen.
Yeah. So what are some of the main, I guess a lot of the baggage or the myths or the legends or things that people are still hung up on in the areas where you are that need to be dispelled or need to be, again, if we're talking from your perspective, seen with their own eyes, that people still have the hangups about wolves that have been handed down for generations. Is there something in particular that really sticks with people? One certain myth, one certain connotation that people are associating with wolves in particular?
Yeah, one thing that really stuck with me over the years, and one of the producers said it early on, was that once wolves start depredating sheep, you can't stop them. That is something that you're going to have to lethally control them to get that depredation to stop. And that just hasn't been the case. It's not what I've found to be true. And certainly, I don't want to make it sound like conflict mitigation tools are 100% effective all the time. I mean, there are situations where they don't work. And generally, it's a situation where a large sheep band, part of that gets separated and away from the dogs and away from the fox lights, maybe on the backside of a ridge or something, and are kind of caught out in the open without any of the human presence tools that, or any dogs, and they can still have a depredation. But with conscientious husbandry, herders doing their job, keeping the sheep bunched as best you can, and the use of dogs and fox lights, and very minimal complement of conflict mitigation tools, you just can make a huge difference and not have any problems. We've had on 2 occasions depredations that we deployed the conflict mitigation tools and went another 80 days without any problems in some of the same allotments with the same wolves without issue. So I guess what my experience has been is that, if you use the stuff properly and you put it out there, you got to have it on the ground. It just works.
So we're talking about sort of misconceptions from that point of view. Are there any misconceptions about this Idaho bill that sort of liberalizes wolf hunting? Is there anything that the headlines are perpetuating that maybe is a little more extreme than what is really happening? Or is it as extreme and graphic as it seems?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's very extreme and very lopsided. My money's on the wolves. I don't think they can get it done, to be honest with you, because wolves are so adaptive and really shy of human presence and humans in general that, I think that maybe is being overplayed just a little bit, that this is not going to be an easy thing to get back to 150. And my money's always going to be on the wolves. I think they have the upper hand. So
what's the general feeling of the public where you are in Hailey in terms of, I guess, the state, if you know, of the state bill or just of wolves in general in your community or the individuals that you're around more so?
Yeah, generally it's somewhat favorable. This is a big recreational tourist type setting. So people in general want to see wolves in the wild and hear a wolf howl. I mean, that's probably top 10 greatest things you can do in a wilderness setting is see a wolf or hear a wolf. But it's somewhat mixed. I mean, there are hunters and certainly the sheep producers have a somewhat less favorable opinion, but for the most part have been willing to go along with coexistence, at least in this valley.
I mean, it's good to hear. It seems as though that there's, again, I think with people like yourself and Suzanne Ashestone and all these others in the coexistence field, it's only going to continue. I think the numbers and the studies and the testimonies of individuals like you are going to give it more legs so that it's going to be hard to argue that it doesn't work. And I think coming from, again, the hunter, yourself as a hunter, Brett Ox, who is a hunter, others who are actually go, hiking in the backcountry, who see the elk, who see these measures work. I think that's really a good gain for wild ecology and for these ecosystems to really let themselves manage themselves so that and you even said it too, to have the least amount of human interaction as possible to use these other measures, fox lights and things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think even, when you look at some of the management issues facing ranching and agriculture, I mean, elk are probably top of the list for alfalfa depredation. And what better tool could you use than a wolf pack that's eating elk and displacing elk and moving elk? I mean, I would be excited to be someplace where there's an active wolf pack and elk depredating alfalfa, because I mean, I would be this is it. Let's see what we can do here. Let's, as long as the wolf pack is respecting the conflict mitigation tools, I mean, holy cow, does it get any better than that?
No, it doesn't seem that way.
Why is it so hard for some people to feel that same way?
Well, I try to stay and have tried to stay out of the politics and the human baggage associated with large carnivores from the very beginning. And I look at this stuff as a wildlife management issue and try to use that bar to make decisions and and I just see a huge opportunity when it comes to coyotes and elk to use wolf presence to mitigate some of those depredations, which are far more costly than wolf depredations have ever been to agriculture. So I just think that's an exciting possibility that I wish we could get some more wolf presence on the landscape, so we could maybe try some of that stuff. And we saw some of it this season, but I'm afraid with SB 1211 that wolf presence is going to be somewhat diminished, and we're just getting to the point where we're seeing some good wolf presence that we were able to make some determinations that maybe they're moving coyotes and elk a little bit. So that part was a little bit disappointing. I was really looking forward to moving forward with some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's incredible to hear that, because it's the second or third time I've really heard about it. And I have been reading too about what you were saying about elk, is that they do come onto ranches and farms, and they're eating the hay and they're eating the meal for the cows. So then the cows aren't gaining the weight, and ungulates can be a problem also. I think there's this, as you said, the pendulum swings more towards the predator, because the animal, whether it be livestock, lamb, cattle, the physical animal itself is taken, but others don't understand that if the cattle doesn't make weight or the sheep don't make weight and they're selling it by the pound for a certain market rate, I'm sure that goes into the factor economically for the farmer, for the herder. So it's really this, again, it goes back to, as you said, wolves driving away coyotes, also keeping the elk herds away as well. So it's this system that has to keep running in order for everything to sort of work in conjunction with each other.
Yeah, right. It's we don't look at elk as being a huge depredator, a huge cost to producers, but I mean the loss in hay and loss in alfalfa is huge. And I don't remember the exact cost, but it's a big number. And so if you look at it as a management issue, if I can use wolves to control elk, they're certainly going to be eating elk, so there's less elk. And if they move elk around, that's a benefit. I have never believed the idea that elk are being pushed out of the wilderness into these farm fields by wolves. I mean, I just don't buy that, because if the elk are out in the farm fields, well, guess what? Wolves are going to be out there too, because they eat elk. I mean, that's just the logic. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me to say that all the elk are hiding in the alfalfa, and the wolves aren't out there eating elk. Well, that's just natural. They're trying to exist and make a living off the landscape. And if a easy meal is available, well, they're certainly going to take advantage of that. And as a sheep producer and coexistence guy, it's my job to make that a more costly, harder for them to do, and for them to look at that and say, well, maybe we'll have elk calf tonight instead of sheep. So,
no, I love it. I love all the work that you're doing, Kurt. This was fascinating and definitely, I learned a lot here, and we're going to get to. I want you to promote the websites for Lava Lake Lamb and obviously for Wood River Wolf Project and things of that sort. I only have one more question. Stephen may have another after I ask mine. But my question for you is, when you hear the word wolf, what is the thing that comes to your mind?
Well, the first thing I think of is balance. Wolves balance an ecosystem, and we certainly need a more balanced approach to managing large carnivores and wolves in general. So,
Stephen, do you have anything else before?
No, sir. I'm good.
Tell everybody where they can Lava Lake Lamb, Wood River Wolf Project. And also, I didn't get to this, and that's my bad on the apology, but you also have some great photography. I was looking up some of your photographs, and they are absolutely great stuff. So those three things, please let people know where they can check all that stuff out.
Yeah, so I have been very active in the photography part of it for quite a few years, because the coexistence stuff kind of replaced that time-wise for me. But you can follow me at Wilderness Trails Project on Instagram, or Kurt Holtzen on Facebook. And then the lavalakelamb.com is the website for Lava Lake Lamb. And then the woodriverwolfproject.org is where you can find the Wolf Project.
That's great. So yeah, so if they follow you, what sort of things can they expect to see on your Facebook, Instagram? Are you dropping photos? Are you talking about what's happening with Lava Lake Lamb? Are you pretty much giving out that information pretty regularly?
Yeah, so that's pretty much all I post on social media is coexistence related material, what's going on in the field, and coexistent tools and what we're using and how we're using it. And that's pretty much all I post. Yeah, real quick before we go, I have a few things here I was going to show you, and I realize it's a podcast, so the audience won't be able to see it. But this is a fox light. This is a fox light. This is a solar fox light. Solar version of the fox light, and what you get is this part is what you buy. So what we did was come up with a way to use it in the field. Looks like it's already going off, but so we modified electric fence posts at about 2 feet to make it easier to deploy in the field and easier for the herder to use. And let's see if it'll. So that's what it does. It's a randomized pattern of red, blue, and white lights that will go off all night. And it's randomized. It's not always the same, and the timing is different. That's the solar fox light, and this is the older style. This is the first style that came out. It's got a big 6-volt battery. It's pretty heavy, a lot harder to use in the field. And really, they're designed to go on a green T-post, which is pretty heavy. And if you show up in the field with green T-posts, the herder will look at you like you're crazy. And the green T-post will be brand new at the end of the season. And then the last thing we've been working on this season is the dog collar. And this is about 15 ounces of 2 layers of leather and Kevlar for protection. And then this particular one's a little bit fancy because it has a GPS location device, and then it also has a blue blinking light that goes.
That's for deterrence, or that's for for a human to see the dog?
This is a deterrent. It's human presence force magnifier for the dog. I mean, wolves don't run into too many livestock guardian dogs wearing a blue light, so. It's just something they don't see, so it gives them an added level of human presence to help. It's a protective collar, but it's also kind of a passive conflict mitigation tool. So you see these quite a distance away, and if a wolf's looking at a sheep band with 4 dogs with a blue flashing light, that's a pretty big deterrent. So
that is weird. And the leather is just for protecting the dog's neck in the event of a wolf attack.
Yeah, it's a protective measure, and really only good against a single wolf. If you get multiple wolves, it's not a big protection, and oftentimes it's also a protection against dog on dog. A lot of times the big livestock guardian dogs will get in it with each other, and kind of gives them a little protection against that too. And it's really more about the blue LED, the flashing LED, being a passive conflict mitigation tool. In the field, so a little bit of both. We had really good luck this year with it, a couple different times. So,
is there a way? Yeah, that was a great demonstration. Is there a way for other herders? Is this technology that you guys are producing and selling, or is this something? How can other individual farmers, livestock people get this technology?
Yeah, so it's not really. Anything that we're coming up with, we're just adapting what's commercially available to an easier use for herders and the way that we're using them. The fox lights are very available on Amazon or almost any outlet, and they're really a go-to thing. And then the collar I'm building myself, and this is the first season we fielded them, and I'm not sure where we're going to go with it, but it's kind of handmade right here at this desk, actually. So,
and you are hands-on, Kurt. I love it. This conversation was awesome. This is, again, you're one of the rock stars, I think, that are, again, in this field, and you are the perfect radical middle person that is joining our pack, I think, on this podcast. So thank you so much for sharing information, sharing your stories. And everybody, we're going to post all the websites, but please check out Lava Lake Lamb, check out Wood River Wolf Project, check out Kurt on Instagram, Facebook. This is valuable information, and these coexistence tools are great and they're working. So Kurt, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was an absolute joy to visit with you fellows. So
yeah, thank you very much, Kurt.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. House to everybody out there, and Steve and I will be with you all next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Looking to support Wolf Connection or sponsor one of the wolves in our pack? Just go to wolfconnection.org, click on the Donate tab, and find out more information.